Teachers of Reddit, what is the craziest reason you have had to send a student to the office? A new male student, year 4, gets mistaken by his classmates for being female. He had long shiny hair. I'm guessing this wasn't the first time this has happened, as he immediately jumped to the top of his desk, pulled out his cock and balls, waved them out to everyone yelling, "What the fuck is this? I'm a boy, I'm a boy." Got into a fist fight with their mother outside the classroom door. My mom's been a teacher for many years. Besides the usual masturbators and the general nuisance kids, there was a sad one recently. Apparently one of her middle school students had been coming in day after day just absolutely filthy, wearing the same dirty clothes. She notifies the office and they talk to her and the parents. Apparently the family has been living in an RV with no running water. I'm not sure if this is due to homelessness or what. We're in a rural area and it's not uncommon to see people living this way. The school offers to let the girl shower at school, and they even have a special shop of sorts free to the students, of course, for clothing and things like hygiene items. The only issue is the school needs the parents' permission to let her shower there at the school, and the parents won't grant it. I'm not sure why. And yes, CPS has been notified several times, but they must be deeming the family's dwelling habitable in some way, though I'm not sure how the parents are getting away with such horrid obvious neglect. My mom says the kid is just so sweet, but she smells bad and looks even worse, and she's afraid the bullying will start soon. The area I live in is absurdly poor and very rural, so sadly such instances are not unusual. Added, a lot of people have suggested wet wipes. This is a good idea and I'll mention it. Some people have said this is not neglect, so I guess everyone has different ideas of neglect. Overall, I think it's a pride issue and perhaps some other things going on. We were doing sketch comedy in 6th grade a few years back, and seeing as it was a nice day we went outside to practice. From across the field I see one of my students very clearly and aggressively trying to put his junk on a prone classmate. When I asked him, he said it was for his sketch and he was playing a character named the Iron Teabag. The best was the follow-up text from my boss saying I had to Google what teabagging was before I met with the kid. Kid in boarding tried to cook a whole raw chicken with like 5 minutes in the microwave. A whole chicken. 2 stories. The first one is just super sad. I was covering for a 5th grade class, and a girl walks in wearing a Hustler tube top, a pair of Daisy Dukes that were cutting off circulation even though she was a super tiny 10-year-old, and a whale tail sticking out the back. She very clearly had not dressed herself, and she was visibly uncomfortable both literally and figuratively. Poor thing was grateful to be taken to the office, though I'm sure the call home was unpleasant. The second one is just weird. Each morning I let my kids talk about whatever they want for 5 minutes. Kinda like show and tell for teenagers. One morning a kid opens the comment portion by just saying Kobe, that's it. No elaboration, nothing. A kid in the back says, "Man, Kobe sucks." First kid was super offended. "What? Yo mama sucks," before I could even register the craziness that was happening. The second kid is out of his chair, over the tables, and wailing away on the first kid's face. I had to write up a report of what happened, and the office staff kept saying I needed to finish the report. This can't be everything that happened, oh, but it was. Utterly bizarre. Added, I was only subbing the first class as a favor, so I don't know what happened to the girl in the first story or whether child services was called, but as she didn't return to class later that day, I would guess the front office did exactly that. One kid kept stabbing another kid in the neck with a needle. The kid getting stabbed didn't feel it, but I saw it. The stabber was sent to the office, and the other kid was none the wiser. Student was wearing sweatpants that had a hole in it and his penis would flap out and was visibly noticeable to myself and other students. I've had students attack me and say horrible things, but this was the most memorable. Kid ended up needing clothes, a shower, and a place to do laundry which the school provided. I remember I tried to get a male staff to talk to him, but at 17 he did not want to hear it, so we had to resort to the office. Kid dropped a folder full of Xeroxed copies of his hairy ass. Turns out he had been taping them to people's lockers all over school. 7th grader in North Philly went into the teacher's lounge, which was a small room that had a fridge and a table that sat 6 teachers. Took a teacher's meatball hoagie out of the fridge and threw it down the fire exit stairs. This kid had 12 pages of single-spaced and pints Times New Roman of write-ups in Power School. Never got expelled, just wasn't allowed to enroll after 8th grade. This kid was a complete asshole, not a teacher, but my dad was a bus driver, and one day, this kid gets on the bus, sprinting, and nearly knocks himself out on the chair. When my dad goes over to see what's happened, he realizes the kid had no pants on. The mother, who drove off in her car extremely quickly, had literally sent this poor kid to school with no pants on. My dad got a student he knew really well to sit next to this kid and comfort him, and also make sure everyone else wasn't assholes. My dad, when he finally got to the school, walked this kid into the office and asked for a spare pair of pants. Poor kid. That mother was an asshole. Kid shows up to class 15 minutes late to a 40-minute period. 7th grade. Sean, sorry Ms. G, I was in a bad mood and I didn't want to bring it to class. Me, hi Sean, I will still have to count you tardy. You're extremely late and I need to know where you are for safety reasons. In the future there's a counselor request form on my Google Classroom page you can fill out. Sean, okay thanks. Things went normally for about 10 minutes, until another student shot a rubber band. It didn't hit anyone but Sean decided to take justice into his own hands. In the middle of me giving instruction he gets up, walks slowly across the room I assumed for a tissue and smacks the other student across the face. Former teacher here. In 1988 I sent a 7th grade male student to the office on a Monday morning because he was bleeding profusely from a botched nipple piercing he had performed on himself the night before. He pulled up his shirt and it looked like 2/3 of his nipple was missing. The blood had soaked the front of his shirt. Kid was selling cocaine. 13 years old. Cops were involved. Had to go to court. Was a massive headache all around. Not crazy, sad. I was student teaching for 2nd grade. This girl was known to come to school smelling a bit off. One day she came in constantly scratching her head. Non-stop for a long time. I pulled her over and asked what's wrong. She told me her head won't stop hurting. She was on the verge of tears. And she was scratching hard. I told her to let me look. She had a massive bald spot on the middle of her head and was also bright red from the scratching as well as a rash. I pulled over my mentor, a teacher. We called her mother while writing a CPS report. The teacher was telling the mom that her daughter was scratching her head and wondered if something happened. The mom took it as an attack and yelled that we said she was a bad mom. My teacher said she didn't say that and she should come get her daughter and have her checked out. The mom's response? I can't right now, I'm with my boyfriend, he's more important. And hung up. She called CPS and I took her to the office. The nurse checked her out. She had a major case of lice and she also notified CPS. She was out for a week. She came back and I asked how she was doing. She said she's okay but her mom didn't want her talking about it. This was about 4 years ago. No idea where she is or how she's doing and I think about her all the time. Mom's a teacher. A girl in her class was sitting weird, squirming and looked ill. Mom pulled her into the corridor to ask if she was okay because she looked like she was going to throw up. The girl started bawling and told Mom that her older brother made her wear some to school. It was a butt plug. This girl was 10. Her brother was 18. Long story short, the brother wound up arrested but I don't know what happened after that. Obviously the girl had to be sent to the office and her parents contacted. School counselor here who is forced against their will to mostly remediate behavior. 2nd grader coming back from suspension shouting "I'm back motherfuckers" upon returning into the room. 4th grader calling other students' parents to tell on them. I thought it was pretty creative despite everyone else being up in arms. 3rd grader having a meltdown about getting parents called. Not in itself a big deal, but the student then shouts, and they take all their parenting advice from Brittany. I hate Brittany. 2nd grader kicking the cane out from beneath an elderly sub. 4th grade gambling ring based of the school's token economy. 5th grade snack bandit who covertly sold snacks because the school's food is so bad. Again, not sure why everyone was up in arms. I can go on. Not a teacher but saw a kid throw a chair at a teacher and got sent down. I was the admin in the office teabagging. Having to explain to a parent that his son dangled his nuts in the face of another student was mortifying. My drafting classmate, who is not a teacher, was reported to the dean for creating a large dong in 3 dimensions. When my instructor noticed it, she gave him praise for his efforts and told him to print it out. After that, he attached a referral to it and forwarded him to the dean. Glorious. For more information in this situation, a referral is bad. Back then, we enjoyed printing things in 2 dimensions. When my sister was a substitute teacher, a kid ate the dead class fish. It was Monday, so it might have been dead all weekend. Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Was working as an intern and was helping the students. One student picks up his backpack, opens it up, pulls a pin of cocaine and snorts it like it was nothing. The teacher and I looked at each other and he told me to lead the kid to the office. Mind you, the kid was 14. This was a upper middle class school. To this day I'm still stunned, horrified and impressed. He took his pants down and dared a girl named Dory to touch the butt, tossing a chair at a fellow student's head because they didn't want to let them cheat. Then the follow-up with the lovely mother who could not grasp that her kid was being suspended and that she would have to pay medical bills. The other student had a deep gash on his shoulder and I was bruised on my left side from trying to intervene. I'm not a teacher but I'm a school psych. I don't send kids to the office, but some of my teammates sure have. Some highlights. Quite a few masturbators have been sent to get themselves cleaned up. Both boys and girls. Not for discipline, as that sort of behavior isn't typically something a student will do to be mischievous, but more of a lack of comprehension how inappropriate it is. Had a kid hop onto the counter onto the big whiteboard case, and straight into the drop ceiling. He climbed around up there yelling and screaming, knocking down ceiling tiles, before we finally coaxed him down. One girl took a class chair and shattered a window in a classroom's back office. On another day, this same girl gave the assistant principal and me a watercolor paint shower. I was lucky. I was standing just behind the AP and only got a few splatters on my jacket while she ended up getting the full blast. I lied. I guess I have sent a few kids to the office. Once. And all at once. It was last year, and I pull into the parking lot of the junior high school I work at. I get a text and pull up my iPad to reply when I realize something is happening in my peripheral vision. I look up to see 5 students surrounding one other student who is on the ground getting the shit beat out of him. I'm an ex-hockey player. I liked scrapping when I was a middle and high schooler. I have a very high standard for what I even consider a proper fight. This was a one-sided gang beatdown. I go flying out of my rig, and charge up to them. Oi, I shout in a kid's face, startling him. He was wearing a hooded sweatshirt and a mask, so I could only see his eyes, which were wide with shock. Glad I had that effect. As I was woefully outnumbered, I just kept shouting like a drill instructor. Stand up, get in line, move. Having asserted moral authority, I quite literally marched this line of kids to the office. The victim of that assault was bruised but otherwise okay. I'm kinda glad it was me who came across it and not the majority of my peers. I'm a relatively tall guy in good shape. I can be intimidating if I need to be, and in that situation, I needed to be. A student repeatedly getting on tables and singing Gucci Gang in the middle of class. Every day. 4 weeks. I'm not a teacher, but in the 5th grade this dude went over to the windows during quiet time and started jerking off. Slightly outside of the question, but as a student I was once sent to the disciplinary officer with a pink slip that only said Norwich and was being overly attentive in class. I was a librarian at a small for-profit college and had to proctor exams from time to time. Usually it was pretty laid back. Students would do their tests nice and quiet and I'd do my thing. One time, though, a girl came up to turn in her test. Then a friend of hers from the same class came up and started going over the answers with her right at my desk as I stared, incredulous. They both eventually looked at me and asked what the problem was. You realize that's cheating and you're going to be automatically failed now, right? Both girls looked incredulous, then got wide-eyed when they realized I was serious. They turned and bolted, and I had to chase after them. Not sure what the plan was because I knew who they both were. I had to chase them to their classroom and then they were immediately referred to the dean of students for cheating on an exam and then running when they were caught. Bonus story: I was also in charge of proctoring the entrance exam for this place, which was another laid-back job. I just had to check in on them from time to time and help with any computer difficulties. Only time I ever had trouble was a woman who I caught with a cell phone. I told her she was done and the exam was an automatic fail and she put the phone down her pants and grinned like she thought that would keep me from failing her. Yeah, that's not how that works. If I say I saw you with a phone on you then you fail. I don't need to go digging for proof. The really fucked up thing was her student aid cleared, so the head of the recruitment aka sales side of things insisted we should let her go. The recruiter who got her insisted she should be allowed to pass. They tried to get me to sign paperwork letting her through. I refused, and so the same dean of students overrode me. On the first day of classes the girl asked for accommodations, which was news to the teacher. It turns out she was functionally illiterate and had no business being in any higher education. They gave her a pass and it was one of the few times I saw them not leave someone on the hook for their tuition. That was when I realized what a predatory shithole that place was and started looking for another job. Jesus, my mom. There was a stench in the classroom but they couldn't figure it out for months. A boy was making poop balls in his desk, rolling up his turds and putting them where pencils would go on the sides. She has completely blacked out this whole thing. I had a student that cried every time I would try to encourage her to answer questions in front of the class. I stopped calling her to the board as I feared maybe she was facing pretty bad trauma or anxiety. So I let her do individual work. One day I find out she, during class time, kept sending inappropriate insulting texts around the class about some classmates and myself. When I emailed her mother about this, she went as far as to use her mother's account to send me an email back saying just leave her alone. The next morning she made a remark that I was very inconsiderate for giving out homework when some students work. I was surprised seeing she suddenly spoke loud and interrupted me during class. She attempted to name other students that work after school just like her, but one of them, Aiden, stood up saying, "So? I still get my homework done. Except I don't waste time gossiping about others and using crocodile tears when it comes to showing my understanding in class." She was shocked, stood there for a little bit, and started crying. which clearly felt forced. I sent her straight to the office, from there called her mother to verify who sent the email, and had her come over for a long discussing. Southside Chicago, there was some kid munching down on a T-bone steak in class. The succulent, delicious meat was distracting the other students, so they sent him to the office to finish it off, unclear if he was going for the name T-bone. No idea how this errant T-bone was obtained, but it looked and smelled like it was freshly made. A colleague had a student eat a live grasshopper in class, in front of everyone. He gagged it back into his hand and forced it back down again. Not the kid you can send. She evacuated the room. Not a teacher, but in middle school they pulled my kid into the office for running a slime racket. She was selling baggies of slime for kids' lunch money. Later that year she was pulled into the office and told to stop illicit sales on school grounds. Turns out she was selling pencils for $0.25 and pens for 50 cents, which was half the price you could buy them from the school directly. Lol. Same kid, different middle school. The next year, got pulled into the office on suspicion of vaping. She wasn't. They held her for 3 hours in the office with the principal and SRO trying to coerce her into confessing. She told them to search her bag and locker. They refused. She started to get pissed off and winged her backpack toward the SRO and said, "Just fucking search it so I can go back to class." They called me for cussing at the SRO. I absolutely tore into the principal for keeping her out of class half the day and then having the audacity to only call me because she used the F word and was being disrespectful when they could have just looked through her stuff and been done with it. I sent a kid to the office because he told an incredibly funny joke and I wanted the dean to hear it. He thought it was great and sent the kid back. X200B. The joke was, why are Catholics glad Jesus was crucified instead of stones to death? This rocks. Because now they go make the sign on the cross instead of punches himself randomly about the head and chest. To this day I have never laughed at a student's joke as hard as I did with this one. 2 stories. Taking a test, a student sighed and I smell alcohol on his breath. Asked him if he'd been drinking. He said no, he had liquor-flavored gum. I said, can I have some? He said he'd left it in his car. Go to the office and tell them you need to go to your car. Called to make sure he stayed at school and didn't drive off again. During a test, a student decided he wanted to see what would happen if he put a paper clip in an outlet. There was a flash. The paperclip clip flew across the room and my clock shorted out. Had a quick lesson about electrical current, then off to the office.